This is one of the craziest Grand Theft Auto 6 leaks of all time, and it explains a couple of things. Number one, why it's possibly taken so long for the game to come out and why it won't be till 2026 until it's here. Number two, different versions of the game that we'll never get to play. And also number three, if it caused some of the biggest names in Rockstar to leave and head for the door. We'll be talking about all that in this video today and a whole lot more. So do take this with a little bit of a grain of salt because it does come from an unproven source. It comes from the user Fravilis on Medium. They posted an article a couple of days ago, Grand Theft Auto 6 Chronicle of the Most Chaotic Development in the History of Rockstar Games. So they must have some sort of source that's been able to tell them all this. This is absolutely wild, and I think to best understand it, we just need to go over the whole thing. So this is what the article says. Designing a new installment in the Grand Theft Auto saga remains a colossal challenge, both artistically and technically. And even though Rockstar Games' reputation is well established, every project faces its share of obstacles between creative imperatives, technical constraints, unforeseen events, internal disagreements, and even cyber threats. There are many challenges to overcome. The genesis of Grand Theft Auto 6, whose internal codename was Project Americas, dates back to November 2013. However, its design only really began in September 2014, the majority of teams having until then been mobilized on the development of Red Dead Redemption 2. And the article begins with the original version of Grand Theft Auto 6, what Rockstar wanted to do from the beginning. It goes on to say this: the decision to return to Vice City and its surrounding areas had been on the cards for years at Rockstar Games. Grand Theft Auto Vice City released in 2002 and still enjoys solid sympathy amongst fans of the saga. The idea of offering a modern version of Vice City immediately appealed to the management of Take-Two Interactive. For the project's synopsis, the team of writers led by Dan Houser had imagined a detective plot worthy of a thriller centered around three protagonists. Protagonist number one, an old Vice City police officer who's reputed to be incorruptible, but ends up gradually falling into organized crime in order to protect his son, who's fallen into the dangers of drug use. Protagonist 2, the police officer's son, a very religious Cuban-American junkie who tries to escape his addiction and the dangers posed by the drug trafficking world. And Protagonist 3, the right-hand man of a Colombian drug lord who manages the importation of narcotics into the United States via Vice City. His ambition is to found his own empire in North America, and the original version was in development until the end of 2016 before being canceled by Take-Two Interactive. The parent company of the star-studded firm deemed it to be too dark, not meeting their expectations. Holy smokes. So let's just go over that. It seems like all along, no matter what story Rockstar was going to create, it was going to take place in Vice City. So that has remained the same. However, the difference is, and I would say this goes back to its internal codename, Project Americas, the story is a lot different. Instead of having two protagonists like Jason Duval and Lucia Caminos, we were going to have three: a police officer's son, and the right-hand man of a drug lord. So this would have changed the story completely. It's not like Jason and Lucia were just rebooted. There was going to be entirely different protagonists all the way around. And that version was in development for really like 2 to 3 years. So that would kind of explain why maybe some of it has taken so long to get out, because they ended up doing 2 to 3 years of work that they basically just had to throw in the trash can. And again, as we'll talk about Project Americas, it looks like that version with those protagonists was going to feature other areas outside of Vice City. And it looks like the final decision was made by their parent company, Take-Two Interactive, who said it was too dark and it probably wouldn't sell all that well. Now, the article goes on to say this: 2 script reboots, while the basics of the game have remained unchanged, the map locations with gameplay mechanics, everything else has been shaped, reshaped, according to Take-Two's artistic desires. So the first reboot, the second version of the game, offered a less dark scenario, this time with a scenario of 2 protagonists. Protagonist 1 was a policewoman, daughter of a Vice City cop who was murdered while on duty, on a quest for personal revenge with the goal of infiltrating the local underworld to dismantle it. Completely illegal, alongside her service as a police officer. And Protagonist 2 would be a drug smuggler's underling, quite crazy like Trevor from GTA 5, rising in rank as the story progresses. But this version was in development for 18 months before being canceled again mid-2018 by Take-Two Interactive. So even though that scenario was slightly less dark, it was still pretty dark. You've obviously got a policewoman's daughter who was murdered while on duty. She's on a quest for revenge. Sounds very similar to Nico Bellic's story in Grand Theft Auto 4. And then you've still got the second protagonist who is involved in sort of the drug underworld. So on one hand, you've got this policewoman officer's daughter. You've got a drug smuggler, crazy guy who's trying to rise up. At least this story is slightly similar with the two protagonists, one being male, one being female. And it seemingly primarily takes place in Vice City. But again, that was canceled after a year and a half by Take-Two Interactive in 2018. Now, this second reboot, the third version of the game, remained in development for only a few months. The storyline was similar to the first reboot. The grieving policewoman was replaced by an African-American man, a former soldier, released from prison and falling into the criminal world. This version was canceled by Take-Two Interactive in March 2019. So they clearly didn't like that. The African-American man, former soldier, released from prison. But you can see that we're still getting similar vibes. You know, we have a former soldier in Jason. That part's true. Lucia was released from prison. So even though some of it was cut, a lot of it was ultimately repurposed. And then the next part of the article says necessary break. After 3 different versions of the Grand Theft Auto 6 script developed by Dan Houser and his team of writers were rejected by Take-Two management, the vice president of creative at Rockstar decided to take a sabbatical at the end of March 2019. Mentally and physically exhausted after months of rewrites that were systematically swept aside by the owners of the company he had co-founded in 1998, Dan Houser chose to step down and temporarily relinquish his duties as vice president of creative. And as you guys know, almost a year later, on February 4th, 2020, Take-Two Interactive announced through a press release that Dan Houser was resigning at Rockstar, and his last day of work would be March 11th, 2020. Then, as you know, in February 2021, Dan Houser founded his new company, Absurd Ventures. We're not going to be talking about that in this video, but what happened at Rockstar after that, the next part of the article goes on to say no restructuring. Dan Houser's departure was not announced internally at Rockstar. Rockstar developers learned the news at the same time as the public through a terse statement released by Take-Two Interactive. The departure came as a blow to the creative teams, as Houser's figure seemed inseparable from the studio's identity. And Take-Two's official statement indicated that the creative direction of Rockstar Games will be handled by the existing team under the direction of Sam Houser. And this is where we get our fourth and final scenario, which was approved. After 3 cancellations, the 4th storyline for Grand Theft Auto 6 was presented and approved by Take-Two Interactive at the end of 2019. The storyline will focus on 2 protagonists, a couple whose plot is inspired by the story of gangsters of Bonnie and Clyde. The man, Jason, former military man, falls into the criminal underworld, taking up the idea of the third vision, except that he's not African American but Caucasian, and he does not leave prison. And Lucia, Latina from Liberty City, she is the one who's getting out of prison. And development began in earnest at the beginning of 2020, but misfortune never comes alone. And some of those misfortunes they're talking about include the COVID-19 pandemic, which forced many studios, including Rockstars around the world, to adapt new ways in which they develop video games, including remote work, use of VPNs, etc., which apparently was one of the causes of the massive 2022 leaked footage that occurred. We're not going to go over all of that. You guys know what happened and all the footage that was put out online of Grand Theft Auto 6. But what this did for Rockstar was a ton. And this was understandably massive for Rockstar, not in a great way, having to deal with the repercussions of the footage that was out there, spending millions of dollars enhancing their security protocols throughout their studios, and making sure that something like this would never happen again, all while still trying to develop the game. So from 2014 to 2025, you had essentially 4 reboots of the game. You had the creative mind of Rockstar Games and Grand Theft Auto since the beginning essentially just leave and then was let go by Rockstar. You had a global pandemic which shut down the world for a couple of years. You had arguably one of the biggest hacks and leaks of all time thanks to a cybersecurity breach. It's no surprise that the game was ultimately delayed, but this gives us an idea of, number one, why it took so long, but also, number two, versions of the game that we never got to experience. And at the end, there might be some bits and pieces that were put into Jason and Lucia and Vice City and all the characters we're going to meet. But at the end of the day, it took nearly 10 years to get this thing right. And it's those versions of the game that may never see the light of day, but I would arguably say it's one of the reasons why it's taken so long for Grand Theft Auto 6 to get here. But anyways, I found this absolutely fascinating. If this leak is true, which it seems very detailed, and of course it only focuses on one thing, the development of Grand Theft Auto 6, so you have to believe that this individual with this information is telling the truth. I'll leave a link to the article in the description if you guys are interested. But of course, let me know what you think in those comments down below about everything we discussed. I'd love to hear from you guys down there. If you guys did go and enjoy this video though, a like rating would of course be awesome. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are new. You want to stay up to date on all the GTA 6 videos that I'll be doing here on my channel. And be sure to ring that notification bell as well. Sometimes YouTube just doesn't work, and if you ring that bell, you'll always be guaranteed to be notified when new videos arrive. But of course, as always guys, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.